portrait of a lonely human being who doesn't know anything about himself, who has very little identity. His identity comes from what people say about him, what people write about him, and the people who take his picture, but he doesn't have any familiarity with
Steven Spielberg is widely considered the greatest filmmaker of all time, a master of storytelling whose movies have defined generations. From Jaws to Jurassic Park, from E.T. to Schindler's List, his films have earned billions at the box office and countless awards. But behind the camera, Spielberg's perfectionism, vision, and relentless drive haven't always been easy for actors to handle. Some stars thrived under his direction, while others walked away with resentment, clashing with him on set in ways that left scars. Today, we'll uncover 6 actors who truly hated working with Steven Spielberg. From rising stars who found his methods unbearable, to Hollywood legends who vowed never to collaborate with him again. These stories peel back the curtain on the darker side of movie making, showing that even the most successful director in history is not immune to conflict. For most actors, the chance to work with Steven Spielberg is a dream come true. But for some, the experience quickly turned into a nightmare. 2 names often come up when discussing stars who struggled under Spielberg's demanding style: Terry Garr and Shia LaBeouf. Terry Garr, best known for her work in Tootsie and Young Frankenstein, was cast in Spielberg's 1977 science fiction classic, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. While the film became a critical and commercial triumph, Garr's role left her feeling frustrated and overlooked. She played Ronnie Neary, the wife of Richard Dreyfuss's character, who becomes increasingly disturbed by her husband's obsession with UFOs. Garr later admitted that she felt her part was thin and uninspired, describing it as little more than a nagging housewife. In interviews, she revealed that Spielberg, despite his genius, wasn't particularly attentive to her character or performance, leaving her feeling undervalued. For Garr, the collaboration reinforced the industry's tendency to sideline women in supporting roles, and she didn't hesitate to voice her disappointment years later. Fast forward several decades, and Spielberg found himself clashing with another actor, this time one who was supposed to carry on the legacy of a blockbuster franchise. Shia LaBeouf, who starred as Mutt Williams in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, 2008, was initially seen as the next big thing in Hollywood. But after the movie's release, LaBeouf made headlines for publicly criticizing both the film and Spielberg himself. In interviews, he bluntly stated that Spielberg had dropped the ball on the project, and he went further, suggesting that the director had lost his creative edge. LaBeouf's remarks shocked Hollywood. Few actors would dare to openly insult a filmmaker of Spielberg's stature, especially after being given such a high-profile opportunity. The fallout was swift. Spielberg reportedly cut ties with LaBeouf, and the actor's reputation took a hit. For Spielberg, who demands loyalty and professionalism from his collaborators, LaBeouf's betrayal was personal. And for LaBeouf, the experience left behind bitterness and regret, with the actor later acknowledging that he might have burned a bridge that could never be rebuilt. These 2 examples highlight very different tensions: Garr's frustration over being marginalized, and LaBeouf's anger over creative disappointment. But both underscore a larger truth, that Spielberg's brilliance behind the camera doesn't always guarantee harmony with his actors. His vision often takes precedence over individual performances, and for those who crave deeper collaboration or recognition, that imbalance can lead to lasting resentment, and these are just the beginning. Because as we'll see, Spielberg's long career has left behind more than a few bruised egos, including some of the biggest names in Hollywood. Steven Spielberg has always been known for his perfectionism. His sets run with precision, and his vision leaves little room for improvisation. While this approach often results in cinematic masterpieces, it can also alienate actors who thrive on creative freedom. 2 stars who found themselves at odds with Spielberg's process were Richard Dreyfuss and Christian Bale. Richard Dreyfuss, ironically, is one of Spielberg's most recognizable collaborators. He starred in both Jaws, 1975, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977, 2 films that helped define Spielberg's early career. On the surface, their partnership looked like a winning formula. but behind the scenes, tensions simmered. During the production of Jaws, Spielberg was still a relatively young director, trying to manage a massive project plagued with technical issues. Dreyfuss, equally young but already developing a reputation for being difficult, often clashed with the director. Crew members recalled shouting matches between the two, with Dreyfuss questioning Spielberg's direction and Spielberg pushing back against the actor's inflated ego. While both men eventually praised each other publicly, Dreyfuss has since admitted that working with Spielberg was often a battle of wills. He respected the director's talent, but resented the way Spielberg pushed him to extremes, sometimes leaving him emotionally drained. A very different kind of tension arose decades later with Empire of the Sun, 1987, one of Spielberg's more serious war dramas. The film starred a young Christian Bale, who was just 13 years old at the time, in a breakout role. Bale has since credited Spielberg with giving him his first major opportunity, but he has also described the experience as grueling. Spielberg's relentless schedule, his insistence on multiple takes, and his focus on the grand spectacle of the story left little room for nurturing a child actor. While Bale delivered a stunning performance, one that launched him into Hollywood stardom, he later admitted that the process was exhausting and, at times, alienating. Spielberg, focused on creating a sweeping epic, was less attentive to Bale's personal needs as a teenager navigating a massive set. Though Bale has never spoken with outright hostility about Spielberg, those close to the actor say the experience left him with mixed feelings. It was a career-making moment, but also one that exposed him to the harsh realities of working with a perfectionist director. Both Dreyfuss and Bale represent actors caught in Spielberg's creative storm. For Dreyfuss, the clashes were about ego and artistic control. For Bale, it was about being pushed to his limits at an incredibly young age. In both cases, Spielberg's unyielding vision created unforgettable films, but also lasting resentment. And they weren't alone. As Spielberg's career stretched into the new millennium, more stars would find themselves questioning whether working with the master was worth the struggle. By the 1990s, Steven Spielberg was no longer just a director. He was a brand. His name alone could guarantee box office success. Yet even at the height of his power, some actors decided they would never step onto one of his sets again. Two of the most notable examples are Shia LaBeouf and Terry Garr. Shia LaBeouf's story is perhaps the most public and explosive. Cast as Indiana Jones's rebellious son in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, 2008, LaBeouf was handpicked to bring new energy to the legendary franchise. But the collaboration quickly soured. After the film's release, LaBeouf openly trashed both the movie and Spielberg in interviews, calling the experience uninspiring and claiming that the director was more of a corporate figurehead than an artist by that point in his career. LaBeouf's comments were shocking not only because Spielberg was his director, but also because Spielberg was a producer who had personally championed his casting. Insiders revealed that Spielberg felt betrayed by LaBeouf's remarks, especially since the film's lukewarm reception had already bruised his pride. Instead of defending the director, LaBeouf doubled down, suggesting that Spielberg had lost touch with the creative spark that made his earlier films so magical. The fallout was swift. LaBeouf's relationship with Spielberg ended permanently, and he was quietly removed from future discussions about the Indiana Jones franchise. Terry Garr's issues with Spielberg were less dramatic but equally telling. The actress appeared in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977, as the wife of Richard Dreyfuss's character. While the film became a classic, Garr later described the role as frustrating and limiting. Spielberg's script largely relegated her character to a background presence, a housewife whose primary purpose was to complain about her husband's obsession with extraterrestrials. Garr felt that Spielberg didn't take her seriously as an actress and that her role was underwritten to the point of being dismissive. She has since spoken about the experience with a mix of humor and bitterness, saying she spent most of the film screaming and yelling without any real character development. For an actress who would later earn an Academy Award nomination, the lack of depth in Spielberg's project was disappointing, and she quietly vowed not to work with him again. Both LaBeouf and Gar walked away from Spielberg's orbit with bruised egos, albeit for very different reasons. LaBeouf saw Spielberg as a fallen idol who no longer lived up to his legend, while Gar saw him as a young director who didn't value her talent. What unites their stories is the lasting impression that working with Spielberg, for all its prestige, wasn't worth the personal or professional cost. Their decisions not to return highlight an uncomfortable truth. Spielberg's genius could create unforgettable cinema, but it could also alienate the very people who helped bring his vision to life. By the time Steven Spielberg reached the 2000s, his reputation as a master storyteller was set in stone. Yet even legends are not immune to conflict. Two final names often whispered in Hollywood circles as actors who walked away from Spielberg with bitterness are Gene Hackman and Christian Bale. Their stories, though vastly different, reveal the deep cracks that can form when artistic visions collide with personal struggles. For Gene Hackman, the tension came during the Royal Tenenbaums era. While not directed by Spielberg, Hackman had long been pursued by Spielberg for roles, including offers in Saving Private Ryan. According to insiders, Spielberg desperately wanted Hackman to play Sergeant Horvath, a role that ultimately went to Tom Sizemore. Hackman turned it down, but not without friction. Hackman reportedly found Spielberg's working style too controlled and overly sentimental. Friends of the actor claimed that Hackman respected Spielberg's technical brilliance but disliked the way he pushed actors into emotionally heightened performances. Hackman, famously blunt and no-nonsense, saw it as manipulative. Though the two never clashed on set directly, Hackman's refusal to collaborate became a quiet but clear rejection, a professional no that carried weight in Hollywood. Spielberg, who adored Hackman's work, was said to be disappointed for years. The more shocking story, however, belongs to Christian Bale, who as a child star gave one of the most astonishing performances in Spielberg's Empire of the Sun, 1987. At just 13 years old, Bale carried the entire film, impressing critics with maturity beyond his years. Spielberg was thrilled with Bale's performance, even calling him one of the best young actors he had ever directed. But the relationship soured in the years that followed. According to Bale, Spielberg didn't do enough to protect him from the intense pressures of sudden fame. While Spielberg moved on to his next blockbuster, Bale was left to navigate adolescence with the weight of being a Spielberg discovery. He later hinted that he felt abandoned, remarking in interviews that he had little to no relationship with Spielberg after filming Wrapped. As Bale grew older, his frustration turned into resentment. He even avoided discussing Spielberg in later years, downplaying his influence on his career. For someone who had once been Spielberg's golden child, the coldness spoke volumes. Bale's silence is perhaps more damning than outright criticism. Unlike Shia LaBeouf, who blasted Spielberg in public, Bale simply erased him from his narrative, as if the director had been little more than a stepping stone. Spielberg, for his part, reportedly tried to reconnect with Bale when the actor became an Oscar-winning star, but the effort was met with distance. Taken together, the experiences of Hackman and Bale close out a fascinating pattern. Spielberg, for all his brilliance, often struggled to maintain lasting relationships with certain actors. Some felt smothered by his creative control, others felt undervalued, and a few, like Bale, felt abandoned altogether. The common thread isn't hatred in the traditional sense, it's disappointment. What makes these stories so powerful is that they come not from small-time actors, but from giants of the industry. Gene Hackman, one of the greatest screen presences of the 20th century, and Christian Bale, a transformative performer of the 21st, both chose distance over collaboration. In doing so, they joined a surprising list of talents, from Val Kilmer to Shia LaBeouf, who decided that working with Steven Spielberg was simply not worth repeating. For fans, these revelations can feel jarring. Spielberg remains one of the most beloved directors in history, a filmmaker who shaped childhoods and defined eras. Yet behind the scenes, his relationships with actors were far more complicated, filled with creative clashes, bruised egos, and unresolved tension. Perhaps that's the final irony of Spielberg's career. While he built stories about connection, wonder, and human triumph, some of the very people who helped him tell those stories walked away feeling alienated,